Welcome, brave souls, to another spine-chilling tale from the Nightmare Maestro. Tonight, we delve into the terrifying realm of the Whispering Walls. Have you ever wondered what secrets lurk behind the thin barriers that separate us from strangers? What if those walls could speak, revealing truths better left unheard? Prepare yourselves for a journey into the heart of darkness, where a simple night's stay becomes a descent into terror. Marcus Holt pulled into the dimly lit parking lot of the Starlight Motel, his weary eyes struggling to focus on the flickering neon sign. The seedy establishment loomed before him, a last resort for those with nowhere else to turn. As a traveling salesman battling chronic insomnia, Marcus had grown accustomed to nights spent in less than stellar accommodations. But something about this particular motel sent a shiver down his spine. The night air hung heavy with the acrid smell of cigarette smoke and desperation as Marcus made his way to the front desk. A bored-looking clerk barely glanced up from his outdated smartphone, mechanically handing over a key with a faded room number. The stained carpet muffled Marcus's footsteps as he navigated the labyrinth of identical doors, finally locating his temporary sanctuary. Room 113 greeted him with peeling wallpaper and the faint scent of mildew. Marcus tossed his worn duffel bag onto the sagging bed, wincing at the loud creak that echoed through the silence. He knew sleep would elude him, as it always did, but he hoped for at least a few hours of restless dozing before dawn broke. As Marcus settled into the room's only chair, a threadbare relic that had seen better days, he became acutely aware of just how thin the walls truly were. The sound of a television blared from one side, while muffled conversation drifted from the other. He sighed, resigning himself to a long night of unwanted eavesdropping. The room itself seemed to close in around him, its shabby decor a testament to years of neglect. A single, bare bulb cast harsh shadows across the room, highlighting every stain and imperfection. Marcus's gaze fell upon a small crack in the wall near the bedside table, and he found himself oddly fixated on it, as if it held some hidden significance. Hours ticked by as Marcus tossed and turned, his mind refusing to quiet. The cacophony of sounds from neighboring rooms seemed to grow louder with each passing minute. Just as he was about to give up and head out for a late-night drive, a hushed conversation from the room next door caught his attention. Two male voices, barely above a whisper, filtered through the paper-thin wall. Their words were indistinct at first, but as Marcus's sleep-deprived brain focused, he began to make out fragments of their discussion. What he heard made his blood run cold. The shipment arrives tomorrow night. Boss wants it done clean, no loose ends. What about the girl? She's seen too much. Marcus's heart raced as he pressed his ear against the wall, straining to catch every word. The realization dawned on him that he had stumbled upon something far more sinister than he could have imagined. In this rundown motel, nestled in a city notorious for its criminal underbelly, he had become an unwitting witness to what sounded like the planning of a serious crime. His mind raced with possibilities. Should he call the police? But what if he had misunderstood? The consequences of involving himself in something so dangerous were too terrifying to contemplate. Yet, the mention of the girl gnawed at his conscience. Could someone's life be at stake? As he listened, Marcus became increasingly aware of his own vulnerability. The thin walls that allowed him to overhear this conversation offered little protection if the men next door discovered his presence. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of fabric seemed magnified in the tense silence. Sleep now. A distant memory, Marcus paced the small confines of his room. The voices next door had fallen silent, but their words echoed relentlessly in his mind. He tried to rationalize what he had heard, to convince himself that it was nothing more than his imagination running wild in the depths of night. But as the first rays of dawn began to creep through the grimy window, Marcus knew he couldn't simply ignore what he had overheard. He had always prided himself on being a man of integrity, someone who did the right thing even when it was difficult. Now, that very quality threatened to plunge him into a world he was ill-equipped to navigate. With trembling hands, Marcus reached for his phone. He would make an anonymous call to the local police, just to report his suspicions. Surely that would be enough to ease his conscience without putting himself in danger. As he dialed the non-emergency number, a loud thump from the room next door made him jump, nearly dropping the phone. Heart pounding, Marcus pressed his ear to the wall once more. The voices had returned, but this time they were agitated, urgent, He caught snippets of their frantic conversation. Someone knows. Have to move everything now. Check the other rooms. A cold sweat broke out on Marcus's forehead as the implications of their words sank in. Somehow, they knew they had been overheard, and now he was in danger. The weight of his decision pressed down on Marcus like a physical force. He had crossed a line, stepping from the safety of ignorance into a world where knowledge could be a death sentence. As he stood there, paralyzed by indecision, the sounds from the next room grew more frantic, the shuffling of feet, the hasty zipping of bags. It was clear that whoever these men were, they were preparing to leave. Marcus's mind raced, weighing his options in a desperate internal debate. He could stay put, hoping that the men would leave without investigating further. But what if they did check the other rooms? The thought of being cornered in this shabby motel room, with nowhere to run, sent a chill down his spine. Alternatively, he could make a run for it now, while they were distracted with their own preparations. But that carried its own risks. What if they saw him? What if they were armed? As he stood there, frozen in indecision, a new sound cut through the chaos of his thoughts. A muffled whimper, so faint he almost missed it, coming from the room next door. In that moment, Marcus's blood ran cold as the reality of the situation hit him full force. The girl they had mentioned, she wasn't just some abstract concept. She was real, she was here, and she was terrified. That realization galvanized Marcus into action. He couldn't just think about himself anymore. Whatever the risk, he had to do something. With shaking hands, he pulled out his phone once more, this time dialing 911. As he waited for the call to connect, he began gathering his belongings as quietly as possible, preparing for what he knew would be a desperate escape. The dispatcher's voice came through, calm and professional. In hushed tones, Marcus quickly explained the situation, emphasizing the urgency and the potential danger to the girl. The dispatcher assured him that units were on the way, but urged him to stay put if he could do so safely. But even as he ended the call, Marcus knew that staying wasn't an option. The voices next door had grown louder, more agitated. They were running out of time. Panic seized Marcus as he realized the precariousness of his situation. He had to get out of the motel, and fast. Grabbing his duffel bag, he moved towards the door with as much stealth as he could muster. But as his hand touched the doorknob, a shadow passed beneath the crack, accompanied by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Frouncing in place, Marcus held his breath, praying that whoever was out there would move on. The footsteps paused outside his door, and he could hear the faint jingle of keys. Time seemed to stand still as Marcus's mind raced through his limited options. The window was too small to escape through, and he was on the second floor anyway. Just as he thought his heart might burst from fear, the footsteps resumed, moving further down the hallway. Marcus exhaled shakily, knowing this might be his only chance to escape. He cracked open the door, peering out into the dimly lit corridor. Seeing no one, he slipped out of the room, his socked feet silent on the worn carpet. As he made his way towards the stairwell, Marcus's ears strained for any sound of pursuit. The motel seemed unnaturally quiet now, as if holding its breath in anticipation of the drama unfolding within its walls. He had almost reached the stairs when a door behind him burst open, followed by a shout that turned his blood to ice. "There he is. Don't let him get away." In that moment, time seemed to slow down. Marcus saw the two men emerge from the room, their faces contorted with rage and fear. Behind them, he caught a glimpse of a young woman, her eyes wide with terror. Their gazes met for a split second, a silent understanding passing between them. Then, with a surge of adrenaline, Marcus turned and ran. Marcus's fight-or-flight instinct kicked into overdrive as he sprinted down the stairs, taking them two at a time. The sound of heavy footsteps and angry voices followed close behind, spurring him on despite the burning in his lungs. He burst into the lobby, startling the same bored clerk from the night before. Without stopping to explain, Marcus raced past the front desk and out into the parking lot. The early morning air hit him like a slap to the face as he frantically searched for his car. In his panic, every vehicle looked the same, a sea of metal and glass that threatened to trap him. Finally spotting his sedan, Marcus fumbled with his keys, acutely aware of the shouting growing closer. As he wrenched open the door and threw himself inside, he caught a glimpse of two men emerging from the motel entrance. Their faces were contorted with rage, and one of them reached into his jacket, pulling out what could only be a gun. The engine roared to life as Marcus jammed the key into the ignition. Tires squealed against asphalt as he peeled out of the parking lot, narrowly missing a decrepit pickup truck. In his rearview mirror, he saw the men racing to their own vehicle, determined not to let their quarry escape. What followed was a harrowing chase through the awakening city streets. Marcus weaved through early morning traffic, his heart pounding in time with the thrum of the engine. His pursuers were relentless, their dark sedan never far behind. As he swerved onto the highway, Marcus realized with growing dread that he had no plan, no destination, only the desperate need to survive. The city flew by, in a blur of concrete and neon, the familiar landmarks of his sales route now twisted into an alien landscape of threat and danger. Every turn could lead to salvation or doom, every decision potentially his last. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, not just for his own life, but for the young woman he had left behind. As Marcus pushed his car to its limits, memories of the overheard conversation replayed in his mind. Something about a shipment, a boss, and a girl who had seen too much. The pieces began to fall into place, forming a picture far more terrifying than he had initially imagined. This wasn't just about some petty crime or drug deal. The level of organization, the willingness to eliminate witnesses, it all pointed to something much larger. A sickening jolt that he had stumbled upon the operations of a major criminal syndicate, one that had likely been using the rundown motel as a base for their nefarious activities. The girl they had mentioned, was she a victim of human trafficking? The thought made Marcus's stomach churn. He had always considered himself an ordinary man, content with his unremarkable life as a traveling salesman. Now, he found himself thrust into a world of darkness he had only seen in movies and crime novels. As the chase continued, Marcus's mind raced through his options. He couldn't go to the police station. His pursuers would surely be watching. His home was out of the question. It would only put his family in danger. With a sudden clarity, Marcus knew what he had to do. He needed to find a way to contact the authorities, to share what he knew before it was too late. But first, he had to lose the men behind him. With a sharp turn of the wheel, Marcus veered off the highway onto a narrow exit ramp, praying that his split-second decision would buy him the time he needed. The sedan behind him attempted to follow, but the driver misjudged the turn. Marcus watched in his rearview mirror as the car skidded, narrowly avoiding a collision with the guardrail. It bought him precious seconds, allowing him to disappear into a maze of suburban streets. The next few hours passed in a blur of back roads and constant vigilance. Marcus's years of traversing the country as a salesman served him well as he navigated a confusing web of rural routes and small towns. Eventually, the adrenaline began to wear off, leaving him exhausted and shaken, but alive. Finding himself in an unfamiliar city, Marcus pulled into the parking lot of a busy diner. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone, hesitating for just a moment before dialing a number he never thought he'd use. The FBI tip line. As he waited to be connected, Marcus reflected on the bizarre turn his life had taken in just one sleepless night. He had always seen himself as an observer in life, content to watch from the sidelines. Now, He was thrust into the role of a key witness, perhaps even a hero if he could help save that unknown girl and stop whatever criminal enterprise he had uncovered. The voice of an FBI agent on the other end of the line snapped Marcus back to reality. Taking a deep breath, he began to recount his harrowing tale, starting with those first whispers heard through the paper-thin walls of the Starlight Motel. As he spoke, a sense of purpose washed over him. He knew that his life would never be the same, but for the first time in years, Marcus felt truly awake. The agent listened intently, asking pointed questions that helped Marcus organize his scattered thoughts. He described the men he had seen, the snippets of conversation he had overheard, and the terrified young woman he had glimpsed. With each detail, the enormity of what he had stumbled upon became clearer. As the call came to an end, the agent assured Marcus that they would take his information seriously. They arranged for him to meet with local agents, emphasizing the need for caution and discretion. Marcus ended the call, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. He had done what he could, set wheels in motion that he hoped would lead to justice. But as he sat there in his car, watching the busy diner parking lot, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his journey was far from over. The walls of that dingy motel room had whispered their secrets to him, drawing him into a world he never knew existed. Now, he could never unhear those whispers, never unsee the hidden truths they had revealed. Marcus started his car, pulling out of the parking lot with a new sense of determination. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He would never again be content to simply observe. The whispering walls had awakened something in him, a resolve to make a difference, no matter the cost. In a world where walls have ears, be careful what you say and what you hear. For you never know when a simple, overheard conversation might plunge you into a nightmare beyond imagination. Subscribe for more chilling tales from the Nightmare Maestro.